episode of Rise and Vibe at the Mental Health Bar. I have with me today Kate Lannan, Education Director and LSW at A Haven. Kate, welcome and thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So let's just start with the basics, right? Tell me a little bit about A Haven, what you guys do, and how you got involved there.
Yeah. So A Haven is a nonprofit organization. We are focused on supporting kids and their grown-ups together after someone has died. Our mission is to partner with grieving families by providing grief support, outreach to the community, education, and hope. And so I'm the education director there. So I get to focus a lot of the work that I do on making sure that the community outside of A Haven also knows how to support grieving kids and families well when someone has died.
That's really amazing. How did you get into this? Why do you work in grief?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think I come to grief work the way a lot of people come to grief work, is that there's a part of my own story that has kind of made me comfortable in this space of grief and has driven me really to want to make sure that other people don't feel alone when they're grieving. I'm a social worker by trade, though, and so really, for me, professionally, making sure that people are well in the communities where they live is really important to me. And then because I do have my own grief story and I come to this work with my own grief story, that is where I feel like I can make the difference and hold the space for people. And so that's kind of how I came to A Haven. I had, completed my MSW and wasn't really sure what type of work I wanted to do. I had taken a grief course when I was at Penn doing my master's. And that, I think, was the first time that for me, I felt like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is the work that is meaningful to me and where I really feel capable and where I know that a lot of people have a need and where I can make a difference. And so, we had been living in Philadelphia and then moved out to Westchester, and I was kind of looking for something that was out in this area. And a fateful Google search kind of led me to A Haven, and I was able to start there as a volunteer first. Again, really just wanting to be able to be with people in whatever capacity was available. And then once I was there as a volunteer, they really couldn't shake me. And I stayed kind of until they agreed to hire me, and I've been there ever since. That was 2018 that I started there. I've been there ever since.
That's amazing. And you said a couple of things there that I just want to point out because they're so cool. You clicked with something and knew it was going to be a good fit for you, found a way to get involved and stay involved as a volunteer until the right opportunity opened up for you, which is super cool. But really that comfortable with grief, that idea that that's possible is a little bit shocking sometimes, especially, in the culture that we live in and how we treat grief as a society. So talk to me a little bit about that. Whenever you say that, not only are you comfortable in your own grief and in working in grief, but how do you get communities and families to be comfortable in grief and supporting each other?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think for me, the first really significant grief experience that I had as an adult was when my dad died when I was 26. I had just turned 26, and it really rocked my world, the experience itself, but also how ill-equipped everybody was, how it felt really like my whole world had been changed. And so everything felt different. Everything looked different. Nothing was the same. Really nothing was untouched by his loss. And yet everything around me continued on as normal.
Yep.
People around me also wanted to continue on as normal. And there was really not any space for how different my life was then at that moment and how different my future would be as a result of the loss. And so that was such a shock to me that, wait a minute, how come nobody seems ready or willing to do this with me? And then, that my dad was a social worker as well. And so it had kind of always been an idea in my mind that I too someday would go into social work. And so after he died, I felt ready to pursue that line of work. So when I realized that I was ready to take the next professional step, because I wanted to be helpful to people, was when I really started to think about how I could make sure that nobody had to feel as alone as I felt when I experienced that. And so I think,
so much sense.
there are people who have walked in grief who know what it's like. And if we can really capitalize on the people who have had to go through it before and can help usher in new people who are grieving and building a sense of community, then we know that we're not alone and that there is no right or wrong way to grieve, but that we can do it together, and that that's a way to kind of ease the pain of the loss. I think that that's a good place to start.
That actually makes a lot of sense to me and helps us dive right into this incredibly difficult topic,
Yeah.
With grief, and it not being talked about and not being supported, right? So it's really amazing to me that people like you and Haven, and I'm sure, other organizations with similar focus, are out there to help us break through and figure out how to support each other. Why do you think we don't talk about it in America?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different reasons for that. The harsher, maybe less charitable outlook on it is that we're used to fixing things, right? Culturally, we have this kind of like pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality, and that like if you work hard enough at something, or if you are driven enough to succeed at something, you can master anything or be successful at anything. And yet here's grief, which is this thing that like there is no mastering, there is no succeeding in grief, and there's no fixing a loss that has occurred, right? We can't bring back our people who died. And so I think that's really uncomfortable for us because we're just not used to not being able to be good at things, and we want to be good at things. We're driven to succeed. So that's kind of one piece of it. And then, the gentler, kinder view of it is that really, and this is aligned with wanting to be good at things and wanting to fix things, like we don't want to hurt each other. Mm-hmm. And we know that this is something that can't be fixed. And so we don't want to open the door at all, because if I open the door to your pain and then you just are standing in front of me in pain, and I can't take it away for you, like what am I supposed to do? And that idea that there could be somebody we care about who is in pain that we can't fix or that we can't take away from them is really uncomfortable. And so we avoid it because we don't want to open the door to their pain and then have them just there in pain that we can't take away or that we feel like we can't do anything about. And so really, we avoid it because we don't want to cause each other harm. Mm-hmm. We're afraid that we won't say the right thing, or that we'll in fact say the very wrong thing and cause more pain that again we can't fix, right? And it like snowballs out of our control, which we also don't like when we can't control things. So I think there's all of these different layers, but really at the root of it is that we're not good at just letting things be painful or letting things be messy. And that's really what you have to be able to do when you are grieving, is just know that this is beyond my control, and that I have to feel, there is no choice other than to feel the pain, right? And so what makes grieving harder is when we have to do that alone. Mm-hmm. What can bring a comfort is when there are other people who can be with us in that. But we don't always know how to do that. And so the end result, though it's not what we anticipate, the end result is that people do often end up feeling like they are grieving alone.
Mm-hmm. All really good points. And so obvious, yet not at the same time, right? Because we definitely do have this, pull yourself up, chin up, keep going, 3 days bereavement leave, time to move on, and all these other sort of things. And I know that a lot of times some of those things come from a place of caring, because you do really want the other person, the person who is grieving, to feel better and be okay, which goes all back to everything that you just said. But this seems, I won't say unique to America, because clearly there's tons of countries, cultures, all those kinds of things. But we do seem to be a little bit in a unique place where there's lots of cultures. I mean, we can point very easily even to just Mexico, right? Mm-hmm. With like their Day of the Dead celebration and the way that they honor their families culturally, members of their family when they pass and whatnot. So why do you think it's so different elsewhere? And what can we do to continue improving it here?
Yeah, so I think you just touched on something really interesting too that is unique about America, and that there's so many cultures represented.
That's true.
And so there is not necessarily a script to follow, which again, we don't like. Like, tell me what to do and I can do it. But if I'm left kind of to my own devices, that feels really scary and overwhelming. And again, like going back to that piece of not wanting to do harm, if we think that we don't understand somebody's culture, or we're not sure what somebody might want or what is right for them or what is acceptable for them culturally, again, we kind of just like hands off, don't touch, don't talk about it. We're not always great either at talking about differences. And so, sometimes it might be a conversation of like, tell me culturally what this is like for you, or what would feel supportive for you. I think sometimes we don't want to other people or make people feel like different, or that different is bad or anything like that. So again, we just avoid. And I think, again, in America, there's so many different cultures that it's hard to know what is going to be best for each individual or each family. And because we don't want to harm, we don't talk about it, or we don't ask. And so I think that's a really unique point that you just touched on, that there is not one size fits all here. And so that's a piece of it. And again, in America, we like to be good at things. We like to master a skill. We like for things to be kind of like clean and neat. And with that comes kind of this lack of awareness or lack of recognition that really everything about our day-to-day lives is very multifaceted. And so if somebody has bereavement leave from work, and then you come back from work and you're kind of smiling in the break room, it's like, oh, you're smiling, you've moved on, like you're happy now, you're not feeling sad anymore. And when any griever knows, you are 1,000 different things on any given day, and much of it often is happening at the same time. So you can be sad and longing for your person and really deeply grieving, and also feel joy and also feel happy at the same time. But we're not always great at holding space for all of those experiences to exist in one, right? For you to be having 5 different emotional experiences like all at once. We want to be able to know, like, are you grieving today, and so it's okay if I say something about your person who died? Or like, are you happy today, and we can just forget that happened because it's uncomfortable for me because I don't know what to do.
Right. You said so much great stuff.
I say a lot of things. I'm very long-winded.
You said so much great stuff. I mean, wow. It ties a lot back to, in my mind, to mental health as well, especially because, all of the emotions and whatnot clearly land in that mental health space. But we treat grief very similarly to mental health, where we're afraid to ask. We don't want to open the can of worms. We don't want to harm the other person. We're not sure what to say. We can't really make it better. We're not good at letting things be, period. Anything other than good, right? So as we continue, to make these strides and do all of these things and learn from others and work towards changing this narrative, I keep hearing you saying, allowing that space for it to exist is like the most basic step one.
Oh, totally.
For anyone that you care about, you don't actually have to do anything, but show up.
Right.
And then after you show up, you can kind of go from there, right? And you can ask the question, how can I support you? And maybe ask it twice, because a lot of people are so used to being on their own and taking their mental health or their grief or whatever else they're going through, something, with their car or their house, or, who knows, right? Like, there's all these different things going on all the time. So the instinct might be to say, oh no, I'm fine. Thank you so much for asking. Right. And if you drop that right there, okay, cool. They're good. Right. Right. Because we want them to be good.
Totally. We want them to be good. And what we really don't want is for them to ask something of us that we can't deliver.
Yeah.
And so if I'm nervously asking you what you need, and I'm also holding the fear that I won't actually be able to help you, or that I won't be able to do what you need me to do, or that I'm not going to be enough for you in that moment. Yeah. And you respond with, I'm fine. For a lot of us, it's a like, okay, I offered my support. She doesn't hear. Like, she's got it. I did my due diligence, and like, I can move on.
Yeah.
When really, like, for the griever too, a lot of times, like, we know that people are afraid or might not be able to deliver or whatever. So we're also kind of holding that uncertainty of like, if I really lay this at your feet, are you going to be there?
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to hold it?
Yep.
Or am I going to like open the door
right.
to support and help and then also still be left alone?
Right.
So we're really both afraid.
Yes. And I'll add to that an additional layer of complexity about the griever's fear, at least from my experience, is that I also don't want to accidentally hurt you with my grief either. Because, well, I'll just use a personal story as an example. Recently, I was at an event and somebody had asked me questions about my son, right? And 9 times out of 10, I am always prepared to talk about Ryland in a very, normal kind of way. But every once in a while, it just smacks me across the face and I have no control left over how I'm going to respond.
Yeah.
And I must have had that look on my face whenever this person asked me the question, because she touched my shoulder and was like, honey, we don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. Which, first of all, was extremely supportive in that moment for her to recognize the look on my face and give me an out if I wanted it. But because of her response, I was actually able to say back to her, actually, I'm worried about how I'm going to impact you. Yeah. And she's like, I'm going to give you the same piece of advice that I was given a number of years ago. Never worry about how much you talk about your person. That's not yours to worry about. The other person in the conversation can find a way out of it if they want to. That's not yours to hold. And I was like, it was almost life-changing.
So freeing.
Right? So freeing to be like, oh, I don't have to hold your emotions and mine, right? Like we can both hold them independently while also having a conversation, supporting each other. And, it was amazing.
Right. And trusting that, like, if you can't do that, then you can leave. Like, you can end the conversation. And really, like, either way, trusting that, like, each person is going to be able to say, like, this is too much for me in this moment, or ask for what they need. Yeah. Touched on one thing that I wanted to like really underline and put in bold is that I think one of the most important things for people to know when you are wanting to support someone who is grieving is to release yourself from the pressure to like do or say the right thing, and instead just acknowledge that like I don't have to do anything or say anything other than be with this person and be open to the experience that they are having.
Yes.
And really know that like that is what a grieving heart is looking for, is somebody who's just going to say like, I will not turn away. You are not too much for me. Your pain is not too much for me. I know that I can't fix it, and yet I will be here with you.
Yes.
And like really that's it.
It's so powerful.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought up the, the worrying about, saying the right thing, wrong thing, all that kind of stuff, because, being the way our world is right now with all the social media and, reels and TikToks and 5-second things and, memes everywhere. There's so many bite-sized messages that, we're all trying to make progress, that I do want to show up for you, right? It is okay not to be okay. Your grief is welcome here, all these things. But then you also start seeing the reverse of that, where like one thing that you say to one person in your past, or said to one person in your past that may have made them feel good or whatever, is now being targeted as like one of the most awful things to say to someone,
totally,
right? So knowing that you don't have to do that is so incredibly helpful. 'Cause it becomes like this giant loop that you can really get caught in.
Yeah.
And just knowing, right from the start that I don't have to say the right thing.
Yeah, because that's where that kind of paralysis sets in, right? Of the like one thing that was helpful to this person, then I heard later was harmful to this person. And so instead, like, I don't know what to do, so I'm not going to say anything at all, right? Which again, like, you know, when we're focused more on just being present, listening if someone wants to talk, and kind of being open to whatever their experience is, like, that's enough. Because,
Yes.
you know, platitudes are platitudes. And like you said, like, something might be genuinely really helpful and healing to one person, and to someone else they may feel like this is the most diminishing, insulting thing like anyone has ever said to me. And we don't want to do that, right? I think we have to remember that people don't want to hurt you, and so like be wary of being wounded too much by someone's silence or lack of presence, right? Because oftentimes it is born of them not wanting to do further harm.
Yes.
But, you know, these feeling like we have to know the right thing to say is where you can really get stuck. And really, you know, if you have something that was powerful for you that you want to share with someone who is grieving, like, oh, someone told me once XYZ and it was really helpful to me. Like, if you want to share that with somebody, absolutely share that with them. And but use it as a way to open the conversation instead of closing the door for any further conversation that may come, right? If we're offering a platitude because I'm uncomfortable and I want to be able to like offer this nice little box for you to put your experience in, and then we can close it up and like walk away, and I can come away feeling like I made it all better for them, and like now we're done, right? That's damaging. But if we're offering something that we hope is helpful, and then still being open to like, but tell me how you are today, or like, what does it feel like for you when you hear that? You know, being open to that it might feel different for them, and letting them know too that like, though I've said this to you, that doesn't mean that like you should be wrapped up nicely and neatly now, and like I don't want to hear anything else.
I love that concept so much, of using it to open the door and not close it. Because there really is a difference, right? Like if you say to someone, I don't know, this too shall pass, or, you know, everything happens for a reason, and they're in a grief state, that's a door closer.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
But if you know, conversely say, hey, you know, once somebody told me that time didn't do anything for me, but allow me to figure out how to cope. Well, that's something, right? You know, and it's like, well, how did that help you how to cope? How did you take the time to learn how to cope? You know, and that becomes more of a door opener, where now you can be there and you can share with somebody your personal experience and whatnot, without expecting it to fix them.
Totally. And without expecting it to be their experience.
Yes.
Like, grief is a universal experience, and yet we are each such individuals, and our grief journey will be as unique and as individual as we all are from each other. And so really, you know, just accepting that, again, like, there's nothing that I need to do or say in order to fix this for you.
Right.
But other than to acknowledge that your experience of this is going to be as different as you are, and I'm here for that. I'm here to be with you, and whatever that's going to look like.
And it's so funny that should seem obvious, because like we're all raised differently. We come from different backgrounds. You know, I personally was raised by a Marine, moved all the time.
Yeah.
So of course those, you know, parts of my history influence my grief story as well. And I think that, you know, we sometimes discount those elements about how we were introduced to grief as a child. Maybe we never really thought about it, or it became a funny story. Like in my family, we love to pick on my dad, my sisters and I, because one summer, whenever we were driving to Palm Springs, which was a trip that we made, you know, pretty much every summer for the time that we lived, you know, in California, to see, you know, aunts and uncles and whatnot, and their dog. And on the way there one year, my dad actually looks at my sister and I in the car and goes, oh,
no.
When we get there.
Oh, no.
And we're almost there.
Right.
When we get there.
We're like in the driveway.
Don't ask about Aunt Bernice. She's gone. She passed away. And we're like, what?
Right.
And
but
that was
don't ask about it?
No. And that was the end of the conversation too, right? So we get there and we're like, I think I was maybe 9 or 10 at the time. We get there and, we're talking to Uncle John. We don't bring up Bernice. Super awkward. Right. And then we're done with the pleasantries and, I'm a 9-year-old, so I go off wandering looking for the dog and I'm walking around the house, Brillo. And my dad comes and he's like,
oh no, no, not Brillo too.
Yeah, the dog too. And I was like, sitting outside now for like the next couple of hours, playing in a rock garden by myself, trying to process the fact that my Aunt Bernice and her dog, are both gone. And like, again, it became a funny story in our family. Yeah. But now, exploring all of these topics deeper, I'm like, there was no space for grief in our family.
No. Wait a minute. Yeah, like we literally could not even talk about the fact that this has happened.
No.
Let alone like how we felt about it.
No. Or any time to process before you should be there for the person who just lost his wife.
Yes.
Yeah. Like maybe go give your Uncle John a hug.
Right. Well, and too for you as kids then too to be, and I don't know what your family did around the time of her death, but to have been potentially like excluded from any rituals around her death as well.
We definitely were excluded if they happened. Yeah. And to be honest, I have no idea if that happened.
Right. Yeah. And so it's interesting, like when we think about, kids experiencing grief and we want kids to have the things that they need and the support that they need, but we don't always take into account like, well, but the adults who we are tasking with supporting these kids also never had it.
Right.
Don't know what it looks like.
Yep.
Don't know how to do it. Don't know how to bring in other people to help do it, right? Like how do we mobilize our friends and family to help support us as a family and to help support the kids and model healthy grief, healthy coping when we didn't have it.
Exactly.
It's not just like a light switch that flips for you as an adult. Like it's something that is ingrained and taught and that you can watch and observe and like what emotions are okay. How do we talk about our people who died? How do we memorialize our people who died? Kind of going back to what we talked about before, culturally, what does it mean in a family when someone has died? How do we incorporate their legacy or their memory into what we're doing? Like if all of those pieces are missing, then we can't expect adults to be able to do that for kids.
Absolutely. And the media doesn't particularly help either. As you were talking, I was thinking about this movie that I watched over the summer, relatively popular. I forget the name of it, but in the movie, the son goes home to his parents' house and there's like pictures of him on the wall. And he's like, Mom, Dad, take these down. It looks like I died in a car accident and you haven't moved on. And I'm just like this idea that, there is a move on point that is absolutely coming.
Right. That everyone will get to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is mind-blowing to me and reinforced everywhere we look.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Which then makes the idea of like reaching out for grief help even more scary because it's like, well, I'm supposed to be able to get there.
Right.
I'm supposed to be able to move on.
Right. Like I should be good at this.
Yeah.
Or know how to do it.
Yes.
Or because I'm still emotional thinking about my person, even though it's been years, I've done something wrong.
Yes.
Or I am weak somehow innately in a way that allows me to not like check this box.
Especially when people say things like, I'm just built different.
Oh, yeah. Right.
I would contend that, but
right.
I hope you never find your breaking point if that's possibly not true. So yeah, this idea that it's super scary. We weren't taught, we don't have great examples in the media that we're consuming. People aren't on the day-to-day necessarily like, oh, someday I'm going to lose somebody, so let me go prepare for grief before that happens.
Right. Which, like, there's no way to do. And we want, ideally we just live and love and enjoy each other and all of those things. And if we are lucky enough to do that, we will also grieve at some point.
Yes.
If we are lucky enough to have people who we love and we are spending our lives with them, we will at some point experience the death of some of those people.
Yeah.
And
it is inevitable.
Normal. It's normal.
Yeah.
And that is not, again, like some innate weakness. Like I have found myself in grief and I have done something wrong. No, it's just a part of being alive.
It is. Absolutely. So, man, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
Haven's already doing their part, right? What are some small things that, the rest of us can do as we take these scary steps into, supporting people that are grieving or grieving ourselves or playing that simultaneous role of both when it's impossible to prepare?
Yeah. I think we just try to do the work of getting comfortable with the idea that not everything can be fixed, with the idea that showing emotion or having emotions is not inherently weak, that grief experiences and also healthy coping experiences are as unique as individuals. And so letting each individual's experience be what it is without thinking that someone's doing it wrong or that they should be doing it this way or that I should be doing it this way because she did it that way. And then also knowing too that like what works for you coping wise is what matters. It doesn't matter that other people journal and that you're not good at journaling, right, or whatever it is, but that allowing your experience of the day-to-day world be your own unique experience then prepares you for times of adversity when you need to be able to rely on what works well for you in order to kind of heal and hold your own peace. Like if you're already in the practice of just accepting who you are and what your day-to-day experience is like, that is the skill that you carry with you into grief.
That is such a beautiful statement. I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So, just trying to think if there's like anything else that I would want to know. Obviously there is, but you've covered so much already, and I feel more empowered in my grief journey from this. I definitely hope others do as well. What is maybe just like one thing that you wish everybody knew about grief?
I think really, we've touched on it a little bit already, but really that grief is just a universal and normal experience. It is something that many or all of us will walk through, and that it is really it's not worthy of being pathologized. Again, this is a normal experience. And so a lot of times, when we meet families at a Haven, caregivers will say like, oh, everyone's telling me I need to go to therapy. I need to be with a therapist, like all of these things. And like therapy is a wonderful tool, but we don't need to go to therapy to fix our grief because grief is normal, and it's normal to kind of have this experience of loving and losing people and carrying the pain of their loss with you and through the day-to-day experience of your life. And that you do that at the same time that you find new joy, that you laugh about other things, that you have other positive experiences. Like the grief is kind of layered all within there. And so really what I would want for people to know is that you don't need to fear grief. It is a normal part of being alive. And that having grief or experiencing grief or loving someone and losing them does not then prohibit you from having other joyful, hopeful experiences over the course of the rest of your life. You will do all of those things together. Your grief becomes a part of your day-to-day life that you carry with you, and you will do that as you experience other wonderful things.
That's amazing. Really, really good. You actually said something, though, that of course now I have another question. As you were talking, you said that you don't necessarily have to go to therapy for grief. It doesn't need to be pathologized. But at the same time, you guys work in like grief counseling and whatnot. So clearly there is maybe a crux point where maybe grief therapy or grief groups or what have you is kind of a nice to have. You could learn some new skills. You could make space. When does it become critical? When should somebody really seek, like, it's not a nice to have. They need support.
Yeah, I think, so a Haven provides groups that are really focused on building a community and making peer-to-peer connections so that you can kind of be safe outside of a grief support group experience, because you know that there are other people who kind of walk in this journey with you. And so that's kind of one piece, right? Like building community, kind of stepping outside of the isolation of the grief experience is one thing. And I think when we start to see that there's a need for the next level of care is when really your functioning is impacted. Your ability to hold both the pain of your grief experience and the normal like ups and downs of daily life, when you find that you really can't hold both of those together, or that you're not able to take good care of yourself or take good care of your kids, when your coping goes from like proactively seeking things that fill your bucket to like numbing. If the only time that you feel like okay is if you are like binge watching bad TV and like eating ice cream on the couch, like if that's all you can do, not that's what I need to do every once in a while because I just got to zone out and relax, like but that this is all I can do is be on the couch. Like that is when we start to think about like, yeah, there needs to be more support here, and really that's going to address holistically all of the pieces of your life, not just the grief piece. Like the grief piece in and of itself is a really normal human experience, but when your ability to function and live in a way that is meaningful is not happening anymore, that's when we go to the next level of care.
That makes a lot of sense. I love that you pointed out a couple of things there. First of all, denying the child the opportunity to see someone grieving, right? And showing that reciprocal trust. Because oftentimes whenever you're so deep in that place, you're not necessarily thinking about the child witnessing grieving behavior, right? You might actually be thinking about protecting the child from witnessing that grieving behavior. And so, going through that isolation, that avoidance, potentially for protection of someone else along with yourself. But then as you start to think about how that actually ties together with all of the other experiences that we have already had that were setbacks or challenging, and the coping skills that we learned along the way, again, it can be so tough to remember those or feel like they are useful or valuable in that grief journey. So again, that exposure of being able to have examples of healthy grieving and seeing that it's okay to do all the different things. You can laugh, you can cry, you can isolate, you can eat ice cream, but you can also, run a marathon or, anything else that you feel would be supportive to you. And sometimes we discount changing your environment being such a simple way to move the energy forward, right? Like I may not be through this space, but I can get out of this living room, right? And I can make a new choice for a moment, and I can allow my child to see me making these different choices and using healthy coping skills. And yes, I may just randomly burst into tears in the grocery store, but that's okay, right? And taking that message of being
yes
is just such an impactful, takeaway, like allowing yourself to exist, allowing your grief to take up space, allowing your grief to take up space in relationships with other people, but also finding those supportive places where you can unload what you need to unload, and eventually getting to a point in life again where you can hold all of those different emotions and experiences together without as much support.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you are worth it, and your kids are worth it, and learning how to grieve is worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, and what, we have too, like this opportunity in that to show kids that like all of the moments that we have and all of the experiences that we have over the course of our lives are worthy of our time and attention.
Yeah.
Even the ones that are difficult, and at a Haven, we hear a lot from adults that, I don't want to cry in front of my kids because I don't want to make them upset. And then the kids are saying, well, I don't want to cry in front of my dad because I don't want him to be scared or to think I'm not okay. And really, we're all saying the same thing, and we could all be doing that together and kind of modeling that, like, even the tough stuff is okay for us to share together and is worthy of being paid attention to.
Yeah. And what a beautiful experience to see and to be seen.
Yeah.
Especially in a challenging part of your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this has been amazing, Kate. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. This is an important conversation, and like we said, we have to kind of reset the narrative a little bit of how we talk about these things, and you've opened the door for that conversation, so I thank you.
My pleasure. And if somebody wanted to reach out to a Haven, are they going to be met with like waiting lists, or like how does it work? Like, can anybody come to you, that has that's part of a family with children?
Yeah, any family with kids who has experienced a death, we would love to be able to receive you and be with you as your family learns how to move forward. So you can reach out to us at info@haven.org. You'll get a personal phone call back. There's no like automated answering services or anything like that. We don't at this time have a waiting list. We hope that we never do. Our goal is to always be able to accommodate any family that's reaching out to us. And so, when your family feels ready or is interested in support or interested in connecting with other people who are also grieving, you make that decision of when to reach out, and we'll be ready to receive you at that time.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And for family definition for y'all is really any caregiver role.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, because every family looks really different, and in all of those families, and whatever shape they take, everyone is welcome at a Haven. Mm-hmm. And so really, if you are caring for children age 18 and under, we have services for you. And then for young adults who are out of the home but still very much a child in like their family's structure, we have a young adult support group as well that's for adults 19 to 25.
Wonderful. And it's free.
Everything is free.
Everything is free. It's amazing.
Free. Yeah.
It's incredible.
Because that just can't be a piece of it for us.
Yeah.
It can't be prohibitive to accessing services.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, Kate. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Thanks for having me.